The record is on, and boys, welcome to episode 1 of the Legacy Lounge. I'm fired up to be in here. I think I'm the most excited person to be in here because of who we're speaking to today. But at the same time, I want, because of how special he is to you, can you open it up introducing our first guest?
Let's go. Yeah, so Legacy Lounge, this is an idea that obviously just stemmed from you and I just getting busy with videos, doing backyard talks, but we got my man, Dr. Armando Gonzalez, Mondeezy.
Going way back.
I want to say that we've been friends now for, I think we're about to hit the decade. We're getting close. We're getting close to a decade.
Wow.
Which is just crazy. But I met Mondo coincidentally from playing in a West Sacramento Rec basketball league. We were the 1993. Was it 93?
96.
96. So we were the 96 All-Stars. I was Shaquille O'Neal. Mondo was, oh gosh.
Don't do that to
Okay.
me. If you're going to tell me how long we've been together.
Glenn Rice.
There you
okay.
go.
So,
Glenn Rice.
So the thing about Mondo that maybe a lot of people don't know about, right? Because Renee, you obviously played collegiate basketball, but my man over here has one of the smoothest jump shots.
Man.
One of the smoothest jump shots.
Well, we can't call it a jump shot. There's no jumping involved.
Okay.
Got
It's
it.
a set shot. But yeah, there's no jumping.
But it's butter.
But it's deep. It's only from behind. It has to be divisible by 3. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense.
I love it.
But yeah, so we met at a West Sac basketball league. Funny enough, weeks after that, he was asking me what I was doing before I got to our basketball game on a Sunday. I told him I went to church. Coincidentally, I was going to his church, which was Bayside Midtown. Now it's Midtown Church. And then from there, the relationship just blossomed. So I'm super proud to be this guy's friend. Just proud of him for just the journey that you've been on. It's been amazing to watch. You've taught me a ton about what you do, which we're going to be talking about today, which is therapy. And obviously, you've gone deep down the rabbit hole with therapy, and what you're doing now with Cheatcode has just been phenomenal. So I can go on and on. Amazing father, amazing husband. Amazing community activist. This guy is just a connector. He connects people like nobody's business. Lately, it's been a man that's been on the move constantly, which you'll get into in a second. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, little bit about family, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, appreciate the introduction. I'm just honored to be a guest on here, especially the first guest. That means a lot. This podcast is going to do really well, so I'm excited to be in episode number 1, man. But yeah, I mean, I'm a kid from Roseville, California, and my mom met my father in Mexico. My dad was born in Mexico City. My mom was born in Northern California, and they got together in a romance novel sort of meeting, and eventually she convinced my dad to move up here, and my dad lived here for about 5 years. They got married, they had me, and around the age of 3 years old, my dad, he left. He went back to Mexico. He struggled a lot with mental health, and that's what got me into this passionate, field that I'm in now, was seeing it take his life ultimately. He struggled with alcoholism. And when I was 14, he passed away from cirrhosis. And, that my journey really was just kind of from the beginning, kind of colored a lot by just survival, and so it was my mom and I, single parent mom. She was a bakery deli manager at Lucky's, if anyone remembers that store. So she grinded, she worked, and basically, when she wasn't working, it was the two of us spending time together, and that left a lot of time for me to be kind of just on my own. It eventually evolved into, finding sports as kind of my passion and joy. And I loved playing sports, but I also loved doing this kind of stuff. I loved, from a young age, I don't know necessarily why I was so drawn to it, but I remember watching SportsCenter and being able to almost photographically remember every play, every highlight, every stat. And then that turned into me loving, going to school and telling people if they didn't know what happened in the game, oh, this happened and that happened. And then eventually feeling like, gosh, I love the commentating and I love the Sports Center anchors. And so, my passion was, and what kept me busy a lot as an only child was my friends playing sports. But then if I wasn't doing that, it was really this idea of wanting to be a sportscaster. So as a kid, I was, just kind of always very driven. And I had a mom who had to give me a lot of leash because there really wasn't another choice, but in that, we had such a solid relationship that not only did she give me that leash, but she also gave me so much empowerment, encouragement. Her thing was, I don't know what I'm doing as a mom. She used to always say that. I literally don't know what I'm doing, but the one thing I know is I know how to love. Man. And I will love on you, to the nth degree. And so much of who I am is from that, and so she always empowered me to really, there was never a sense of putting anything off. And I also had her father, my grandfather, who pretty much stepped up as being the male role model in my life. There was another family friend who did as well. And between the two of them, those are my male role models. And both of them were very much, if you have an idea, go do it. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I started at a young age. It wasn't tomorrow. It wasn't, we'll wait till. It was, don't accept no for an answer. If you want something, go get it. And I don't know if I was born with this incredible drive or if they cultivated it in me, but I know that for as long as I can remember, whatever was on my heart, whatever was on my mind, to this day, I'm doing it. And I have this, weird feeling that I get even now about anything that I feel like God's putting on my heart or that I really feel peace, like I need to go for it, that I just have this weird piece of like, there's literally nothing that will stop it unless it's not in God's will. It's the only thing that could. And those are the things that I enjoy. I enjoy finding things I'm passionate about and just throwing myself into it. A lot of times the things that I'm passionate about and the things we've created now with Cheatcode and working with athletes, just all the things that I've created have always been things that there wasn't a path for. And I think in a strange sort of way that always drew me to those things. It was like always drawn to creating my own path. And not sure even entirely why that is, but that's just kind of always been the way it's been. So in the journey of my life, again, raised by a single parent mom in a village of others that loved on me and really picked up and filled in the gaps. I started off as a kid that was obsessed with sportscasting. Had a sports show at the age of, I was in 8th grade when I started it, and I was working with the Sacramento Kings players and the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants and the 49ers.
In 8th grade, that's when it started.
Yeah. I was writing. There used to be, if you guys are from Sacramento, so it's like there used to be this column in the paper called From the Stands, and it was on every Sunday. They'd ask a question, and people could write in and write their response. And so the way you wrote in was to call and leave it on a voicemail back then at the Sac B.
Yep.
So I started doing that when I was in 7th grade. And I think because I had been working on broadcasting, my voice sounded a little older, and they just started putting me in the paper. And then one day the guy who was the editor of the paper said, I'd like to invite you down and interview you to see if you want a job.
Yeah.
And that was when I was in 8th grade. And I went down, and we got about halfway through the interview, gave me a tour of Sacramento Bee down in downtown, and said, okay, what's your availability look like? And I said, well, it all hinges on me getting a ride from my grandma. And he's like, so are you against driving? And I'm like, no, I'm not against it. Just it's not in the cards yet for me. He's like, well, he couldn't understand. I said,
That's
well,
hilarious.
I was always terrified of people knowing how old I was. I was a big kid.
Yeah.
So he assumed I was older. And when he found out how old I was, I'll never forget, he said, all right, let's go to the vending machine. I'll buy you a Coke. Let's sit down over here. And I'm like, see, this is what I was worried about. But he said, what do you want to do? And I remember him asking me that. And I said, well, I don't really want to be a writer. And he goes, okay, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to have my own sports show. And he goes, okay, when you turn 18, this is what you should do. At the time, I was in 8th grade. So I'm like, I don't have time for that, man. Like that is so far away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found a local public access station that would allow me to be a producer when I was 18. And I just wrote them letters, called them almost every day, just bugged them to the point of literally they were pissed at me. And finally they said, all right, kid, if you can get an 18-year-old to come do this with you, whatever, you can be a producer. Because they're thinking, you're not going to do anything with it, right? And so once I completed that production class with a lot of people that were in their 40s and 50s, those people then became my crew. And I hired, brought them on as my cameramen and my directors. And yeah, when I was in freshman year of high school, I started my own sports show. It was a live 1-hour show. We did that for 4 years, every single Tuesday night, incorporated local high school athletics, but really, was truly for me an opportunity to go into locker rooms. Got the first interview ever with the Maloofs when they came to town. Just had crazy stories that kind of just unfolded from there. And over time, I started progressively quitting sports because I was a very logical kid. And I'm like, I think the one sport that I had a shot at playing at the next level was the one sport that I hadn't fallen in love with yet, and that was football.
Yep.
My size and everything, like it was easy to be an offensive lineman. I could figure it out well, but I just wasn't passionate about it. And so I just systematically quit one by one and to focus on broadcasting. And in my mind, there was no other path. I went to every national sportscasting camp and won awards and was just like, I'm going to be the best at this. I'll be the youngest to ever be on SportsCenter. That was my goal. And then life kind of took a turn when I was 18, and I had a moment living in LA where I was kind of running into some personal struggles. And I remember just being on the beach talking to my therapist at the time and deciding that I wanted to move home and I needed to focus on getting centered and not necessarily having a backup plan, but knowing that school, it finally made sense to me that I probably needed college, because for my whole time in high school, I hardly went to class. I always found ways out of it. I was like using the little, local kid with a show, status to get out of things. And it was at that point when I moved back home and I took an introduction to psychology class when I was down in LA at a junior college. And I knew there was something there. And I also had, as I mentioned, a therapist at a young age walking through all this pain that I went through with my dad leaving and, just all the things I went through. And I thought of what an impact he made in my life. And he was probably one of the only men I felt emotionally safe, fully with, and thought, I don't know what it is, but I've always wanted to help people. And I feel like this is the path I need to go now. And that started a whole new path and journey for me into what I'm doing today.
Wow.
So real quick on this, it was called Sports Scoop, correct?
It was. My mom is actually responsible for naming it. She thought it'd be funny to, my mom still to this day, she loves jokes that involve, stuff that like fifth graders would laugh at. So, she called it sports poop. And then I heard poop, but I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Scoop. Maybe there's something there. And we just ran with that. Yeah.
So props to Anita for coming up with the name.
She came up.
So when you were doing that, was there any money coming in, or was this like a pure passion project?
It was pure passion in my mind. I don't think I even, truth be told, it wasn't until probably going into this recent career shift that I had where money even became something on my mind. And I'm not saying that in a way of like holier than thou. It's literally just, I remember growing up, money was just this elusive thing that I was never going to have. That was just my mom's mentality, my mentality. It's like, money is this thing that we're not driven by, and whatever, like it comes and goes, and that's what credit cards are for, and we're just trying to survive. Like, who cares? Like, just live. And so for me, it was like, this is my passion. I'm living it. And I figured I need to get as many reps as I possibly can in to become great. And that if I can do this now, it was just seen as a competitive advantage. I knew that I wanted to have a family and provide for them, but it wasn't on my radar. And so, no, it was all purely passion. We did get to a point where we eventually had sponsors and, had, different things paid for. And most of our trips, we found a way to get those paid for. But it was always, to this day, it's like, it's always been I love this idea of you got to figure something out. And I love when people go, well, there's no way. Well, there's always a way. Oh. So that's what was motivating a lot of that. And that's how we found ways to pay for things.
I feel like it's even listening to that too, like thinking about kids were built different back in the day.
Man,
right? I mean, like just hearing that story of developing a hustle from and being an 8th grader. And I'm just thinking of our generation. I won't go too deep in that. But one thing that you said that I want to touch on is you said you were talking to your therapist when you were 18. My first therapy session was actually a mentor of yours that you referred to me.
Yeah.
And but yeah, my first time,
wow.
my first interaction with the therapist, it wasn't until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
So my question to you is, man, 18 just sounds like. Did you have anyone in your friend circle or anyone else that you knew about that was seeing a therapist at that age?
It's a great. You know what? I don't think so. And I know that for me, I was proud of it always. So I tell people, about it. But I think that you get older and you start learning. I think I look at some of my friends and even conversations they had, and I think a lot of people saw me almost as this like experiment in some ways of like, is this kid gonna make it? And I because I had so many people around me that came from broken homes and trauma and all those things, and a lot of them weren't making it. And it's not to say I wasn't hanging out with them. I got heavy into smoking and drinking when I was really young and exposed to a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have been at a young age. But it was kind of like I was always the one guy that wouldn't go too far. I knew how to pull myself back. And I think that when they heard that I'm going to therapy and stuff, I think no one ever really talked much with me about it. It wasn't a conversation, but I never hid it. And I talked about how much I loved it, but there really was no one that I had to share those experiences with other than my mom, who in many ways, I say this to her to this day, she is as good, if not better, than I can ever be as a therapist. And she's never been formally trained. So she got me so comfortable with speaking about my inner world and never seeing it as a negative thing. Like I remember getting older and being introduced to different, gender norms, even of men and things, and being like, well, dude, I'm a man to the core, but also too, like my manhood just looks a lot different than I guess it looks for others. Yeah. So no one that I knew, I think at that time was going to therapy. And in fact, she mentioned to me, like I started when my dad left. So it started with the sandbox therapy, playing with toys. I saw a few other people, but it wasn't until Dr. Robert Hoy that really found like my person. And he walked through, God put him in my life in hindsight at just the perfect time, because it was in my high school years that I was not only was I doing the sports show, but I mean, I was throwing parties. I had a fake ID when I was 15. I was at local bars after my show would end, and I'd go hang out. And, I was just had 2 jobs. Wow. I just didn't stop. I never, ever stopped. And so, yeah, I was so fortunate in hindsight to have him walk through that part of life with me, because I needed someone.
Where would you be if you didn't meet him?
That, I think with him, with another guy in my mom's, my mom dated a man briefly who ended up becoming like a father figure to me as well, Kevin Gebro. That's the thing, Renee. It's like I have so many of these people in my life, even the mentor that he saw, Dr. Sean Davis, that are just, there's no other way to look at it, just angelic.
Yeah.
Angelic forces put in my life that saw me, because it took me a long time to realize that the biggest trauma I went through was neglect.
Yeah.
I just was always by myself.
Got it.
So to have people see me, walk through life with me was the most, it brought peace to me. It brought empowerment to me. And yeah, without having him and so many others, there's no question I would not be here today. No question.
So that same passion that you talked about that you had for sports growing up as a kid, it sounds like now in this journey, now you're developing a similar type of passion for therapy.
Yeah, I think for me, when I've talked to therapists too, like though I get invited at times to go talk to like big conferences of therapists, and I'm always the guy that doesn't feel like I really fit in that box because I've always wanted to create again my own thing. And but the one thing I always say is like, let's all think of that moment. And it's not the moment that we thought we wanted to be therapists, but it was the moment that we knew we were born to help people.
There it is.
And therapy was just the path that felt like it allowed me to help people the most. But I remember as a kid, and my mom would recount stories like this, but as a young boy, I just remember wanting to go up and hug everyone I saw, just being like full of love and just bring people together. Like that's just always who I've been. And if people were in need, it always felt like things slowed down and became, my focus got sharper, my wisdom got higher. I felt so grounded and locked in when I was helping someone.
Yeah.
And that's what therapy has allowed me to do. It's just become this container, one of the containers I have now where I can serve and help others. And for me, that's my bliss, man. It's like, recently I was out in Tennessee with the new GM, Rand Carthen of the Titans, who I'm entering my third year with now on a contract doing mental performance work with Cheatcode. And he said to me, as we're getting to know each other, he said, so I have a question for you, and I don't want you to overthink it, but I want you to answer it quickly. And I said, sure. And he said, are you a king or are you a kingmaker? And I said, it didn't take me but 2 seconds. I said, kingmaker all day long. He said, why? How do you know that? And I said, because when I see other people win, I mean, it makes me emotional, but yeah, there's no better feeling, you know what I'm saying? Like that's like the ultimate, like winning yourself is so cool. But when you watch someone else win and you can contribute to that, and you see people heal and you see people accomplish their dreams and their goals, that's literally the stuff that makes me go every single day.
And that's passion right there.
Yeah,
that
man,
is
it
passion
does,
right there.
Yep.
And you've mixed your passion that your want to serve now got mixed with your passion for sports, and it's led you to where you are now. Cheatcode. I'm fascinated with the name in general as well. I want to get to the origin of that, but you get to live out two of your biggest passions put together now. I'm absolutely floored and amazed by it. I got to hear the origin, how it evolved to this.
Yeah. I remember I was processing with my therapist at the time. As you can see, I believe that my whole life I'll always be doing therapy because I always got stuff to work on, and I just love the process. But working with my therapist, and we were doing a virtual session, I was in the backyard, and I was just starting to understand what God was doing, like putting all these pieces together, where I just started working with a few Major League Baseball players, and I was just starting to get other avenues opened up, and I was just seeing all this. And I was, strangely enough, like resistant to all of it, because I knew everything was about to change. Like everything about my life was going to change, and it has since then, and I was scared. And I remember just trying to spend some time meditating and accepting what it is, and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm scared because it's change, which is normal. But this was really, it's like when your friend gets you this gift that you open it and your breath is taken away, because it's just, it is so you, like the gift is so perfectly for you. And I felt like what God brought me in this opportunity was like, really, I can have all the things I've ever done, even the jobs, because I had jobs outside of sports and outside of therapy too, along my journey. Like, you're even going to use that stuff? Like, that was training for this? It felt very surreal. I never felt like I was working to begin with in general, doing my therapy practice here in Sacramento. But when I felt like I unwrapped that gift and understood that it was merging these two worlds, I'm still blown away. Yeah. Like it's just crazy to me. And you know, the way it came about, I think that's one thing that's like, I'm incredibly loyal to people that I love because I wouldn't be here without them. Mm-hmm. And I think that if anyone tries to tell you that they're the reason that they are where they are, then they're lying.
Yep.
Man.
And I know for me that not only did God put me here, but God used people to put me here. And the way I got into this world was, having, the godfather to my kids, my best friend, Jimmy Spencer, who God took him out of his life and just put him in the middle of Hollywood, a deeply spiritual man who could care less about fame and care less about money and all those things, put in the middle of this world running LeBron James's media company as employee number one. And, I watched Jimmy go through this transition of trying to accept this call and not understanding it. And then eventually, after he had been there for a few years, when he went through a tough time, he reached out to me and said, what should I do? I know he didn't say what the cheat codes are, but you know what the hacks are in this world. I don't want to spend, my life in talk therapy. What should I do to really tackle what I'm dealing with? And so I gave him some advice on that. He did it. And then, just like giving a restaurant recommendation to a friend that really enjoyed the food, he goes back to his work and now he's telling everyone at work about it. And in his world, he works with athletes. And so it just so happened, and I just was recounting the story with my first client's wife, who's also my client, Mallory Pugh, now Mallory Swanson, Dansby Swanson's wife, about just how incredible it was that it all lined up. She had just won, I believe it was World Cup, or it was either World Cup or Olympics. I think it was World Cup. And she had to do something in LA, and she didn't really want to go because she's not a big LA person. And so she drags Dansby with her. He's not an LA person. They go do some events down there. And it just so happened that Jimmy had heard about this young baseball player that he heard was really charismatic and just really a solid dude. So, he said, hey, I just saw Mallory, or if you're in town, come by the office. Well, when Dansby came by the office, Jimmy had just experienced, that referral that I gave him for therapy. And so he was just kind of saying how, when Dansby said, how have you been? Jimmy just vulnerably shared, man, I've been going through it, but I'm doing so much better. And then Dansby, being a vulnerable guy, is like, man, I can't sleep at night. I've had so much pressure since getting traded back to the town I grew up in Atlanta. And I'm just struggling, man. I can't call it. I'm lost. I'm a wreck. I'm a mess. And that's when Jimmy called and said, I know you can't take him on as a client in therapy because Jimmy's well-versed in the rules of therapy. You have to have a license in the state you practice. Mm-hmm. But is there a way you can just talk to this guy? And so I said, sure. So I talked with him and I explained everything. And before we hung up, he said, I'm not letting you off the hook. You have to work with me. Wow. And so
Dansby said that.
Yeah, Dansby said that. And I said, okay, let me think about it. There's got to be a way, right? There's always a way. And Dansby, luckily, although he was struggling, was not in a place where he was, truly the standard of care. That's the real big thing. If Dansby had been in a really, really bad spot where he was a harm to himself or things like that, then I couldn't have worked with him. But because he fit in this nice area below that threshold to where he had needs, it was really like, you're primed to be a life coaching candidate. And he goes, okay, well, what would you do if you did it that way? And I go, well, I've only studied that stuff. I haven't really practiced a lot, haven't had a need to. And then it just opened this frame up. And he goes, well, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd do it all differently. And he goes, well, how would you do it? And I said, where are you going to be this weekend? And he goes, I'll be in Nashville, because he played college ball at Vanderbilt, has a place there. And I said, okay. So I'd get on a plane. I'd come out there. I'd spend 3 days with you. I get an Airbnb near where you're at. You'll come over. We'll work in 3-hour increments. We'll take breaks. I'll probably outlast you because I can go longer than you can with this stuff. I'm already kind of challenging him a little bit because I know he's a competitor like me. And I said, but I ain't getting on the plane until you feel different. Huh. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And I got plans back here, man. I got kids. I got to get back. So that was our setup. And I got on the plane and I went out and just, again, we were creating. It's always a lot of what I found in my spirituality, as I learned about the Holy Spirit, is how much jazz is involved in that. And that was something I've always been accustomed to, is improv, jazz, learning on the fly, just trying, I don't know, well, let's figure this out together. This makes sense. Let's try it. You know, after my second day there, after a lot of tears that Dansby shed and a lot of really cool moments and breakthroughs, he said, I don't need this third day. Get back on the plane. I said, buddy, we're just getting started. I said, you brought me here to heal some stuff. I said, forget that. I said, it's time to level up now. I said, you're only scratching the surface. Let's be honest, man. I said, getting you back to baseline is not enough. Everything that I'm hearing, we prayed together, God's got so much more for you. Yeah. So if you're done, that's cool. But if you want to keep going, let's go. Let's really get serious about laying out a very concrete path to you being the man that you're called to be. And that journey just ensued from there. He became a client that I had monthly. We continued our relationship where we had, frequent phone calls. Once or twice a week, we'd jump on Zoom and do these sessions. And then every 2 months, I'd show up in his city and spend another 3 days with him. And before I knew it, the word was starting to travel through the sports world that I was doing this with him. And he was telling people in interviews. And Jimmy then is sharing back with the other athletes around his circle. And it led to, Lindsey Vonn and the Tennessee Titans and just all these different folks that there was never a moment of marketing. There was never a landing page. There was none of that stuff. It was just, let's see if God keeps opening these doors, I'll keep walking through them. And then in that path, there was a lot of inner turmoil I had about, okay, now I'm going this whole new route. This is great. It's very fulfilling. But how does it fit with a bigger purpose that I feel called to, which is making a greater impact? And so that's led to the decision of not just starting a company, but also starting a foundation. That's when we started Cheatcode as a C Corp, and then we also started the 501c3 foundation side with the idea that I would use these athletes' stories, should they choose to tell them, as empowerment for others to not just see an anti-stigma campaign, but instead see someone that said, yeah, I struggle, but I also did something. And it helped. And it leveled me up. And in fact, the very thing that you're afraid of doing, if you go towards it and you do it, that will be your cheat code of unlocking your full potential in your life. And that just, again, it was a lot of different improv around these ideas. Let's and just feeling like if I was passionate about it, if I felt God was leading me to it, we're doing it. And I'm not going to stop until we do it.
Would you, so the question that it came to mind was, therapy it's offered to sports athletes from the organizations, I would imagine. But when hearing that story, it sounded more like Dansby took a different approach. He kind of went outside of the box. And this is all obviously a God, like what you would say, like just a God moment with Jimmy, and then Jimmy running into Dansby. It's all God really connected. But would you say that during this was kind of like almost when the stigma, you said, right? But this is now, you're at the forefront, so to speak, of now athletes are speaking up about it, right? And it's just. But I guess my question to you is, do you think that there's got to be tons of athletes that aren't even taking that first step? Right?
Yeah, it's tough. Now that I'm in this world, and we've had to, Tennessee is really where I've had to really look at some of these questions, because predominantly everyone that's hired me, about 99% have been individuals who choose to come work with me. Being in Tennessee, when I got a call from Mike Vrabel the day of my fantasy football draft a few years ago. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, should I tell him I'm going to a fantasy draft? That may ruin my credibility." I'm hanging out. What's up? Can you hop on a phone call? And so we talked for like 2 or 3 hours and just talked football, talked life, talked everything, talked about his players. He had all these questions. What do you do? And it was all because Dansby shared his story.
Yeah.
And and Mike's son, Carter, is a big Dansby fan. And so he said, hey, Dad, you got to be doing this for the guys here. Taking on that role woke me up to kind of, well, why aren't they using the people that the team provides? And, and what I've learned now of why I was probably more appealing to Dansby, and this isn't a Dansby thing, it's just an athlete thing of, those folks often have two struggles. And one is that they're hired by the team.
Yep.
And, I still face some of that now. Vrabel's got us on the sidelines. He won't let me not. I used to wear my Fear of God and Nike stuff in there. He gave me so much crap about it that finally I'm tightened out, through the roof, tightens everything.
Man.
So it's presented that challenge. Now I understand what it's like, the challenges that come with being associated as being part of the shield, as they call it, so to speak.
Yep.
Does Vrabel know that you're a Bills fan?
There's two people in that organization that know I'm a Bills fan. Taylor Lewan, who will never let me not remind him that I told him that. And then Mike Vrabel. But I think Vrabel forgot by now.
I think everyone's going to know by after this podcast.
Yeah, well, that's true. Now I'm really putting it out there.
Just own it.
The Bills have my heart. The Titans have my mind. That's what I always say. But yeah, I think a lot of athletes, there's two things that really present challenges for them to use team hired psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health therapists. And in some cases now in baseball, it's very prominent to have mental skills coaches, which kind of operate more like the life coaches. But the resistance there, again, is that, the players are thinking, what's stopping them from taking what I'm telling them, taking it up the chain to the front office, and now the front office might use that in arbitration against me. So there's such level of what I call very healthy skepticism, and then the other challenge that I've heard a lot is that, and I don't know for whatever reason why, but I can meet these folks and get in with them real quick, and I used to think that was like I could do that well in juvenile hall, but for whatever reason it's happening here too. And a lot of what their feedback has been is that those folks don't quite get the athlete world. And so you have sometimes really good clinicians that just can't appeal to athletes, or you have people that can appeal to athletes and aren't very good clinicians. And so I think that's been this little niche that I've tried to carve out for myself, and then the other people that I've brought into the space through Cheatcode with me, the other coaches.
Incredible. And that story is just absolutely incredible. I didn't know you and Jimmy were so close, man. He is one of my favorite people in the world. I knew him from back when we were at Sac State, and watching his career just take off, man, just a big shout out to him. Just to hear that, small world, crazy. Didn't even know that it was associated with it. But I think one of the things, your goal is to really help so many people. The fact that you're able to do this with athletes, one of the things from the outside in, we see these athletes and they look like superstars, but the reality of the situation is they're going through every bit as much as the regular person is, sometimes even more. So I think that would empower people outside of sport that aren't this alpha male, that aren't deemed as successful, to open up more about what they need in their own personal lives. That's a huge opportunity of what you're doing, man.
Yeah, and I think I have to own that, and I've said this to athletes, I'm just always maybe, transparent to a fault in some instances, but I said, I didn't have a whole lot of compassion for you guys, coming into this. I thought a lot of the things that you have are first world problems to the nth degree. And I told him, I said, it was hard for me to see how God would call me to this work, feeling like there's more meaningful work to be done with people in far worse situations. But what I learned now, and I would totally strike down that idea now, because there's so much isolation for people that are really successful. And I think that's true for all people, right? But when you're successful to that level, and then there's this entitlement from human beings in the public that don't know you to feel like they're entitled to comment on your lives, your decisions.
For them.
Yeah, and then with all the social media platforms, and then we also, that created a level of pressure, scrutiny. It also created smaller circles. You look at financial exploitation, which is gigantic in that community as well. So there's so much isolation happening. And now I would look at it and go, I see some of these really successful people, and you hurt for them. I've seen up close, through some of the athletes I've worked with, just such painful life situations playing out that are in some ways just the same as you and I would go through, but they're just magnified. And often too, they're happening to people that are in their early 20s. And I think of, gosh, where was I at my early 20s, making decisions.
Exactly.
And there's in that level of pressure and stress, coupled with isolation and a lack of mentorship and a lack of anyone walking with you because you don't feel like anyone can, or you can't trust anyone. It can get people in so many tough spots. And thinking, when you asked me initially, like saying that it's just the impact of that and why it's important for athletes, it's funny because that was one of the ways I bought in early into this. I thought, okay, what did I love about sports casting? I loved doing play-by-play. I loved doing, the highlight stuff. But what I truly loved were the long-form interviews. And what I loved about it was just understanding who people are and what made them tick. And that got kicked off at a young age for me through just a friendship with Chris Webber when I was a kid, which was just like so random. But I waited for him. The first night that I interviewed the Maloofs, they asked if I had a press pass. I didn't. They said, we'll bring you down there. We'll get you a press pass. You'll never worry about it again. Here's Troy Hansen, the media guy.
So real quick, because I know the story, but what did you have to say to get down to the to
well, you're referencing the story to get the interview, which, before that night, that was the night of the interview. To go back to your point, a step behind that, I was a kid in the nosebleed seats at a preseason game. Obviously, I read the Sacramento Bee. I read the article in the Sacramento Bee about these new owners that were taking over for Jim Thomas, these Maloof brothers from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I saw the picture of them enough to remember their faces. I couldn't remember their names. It's always been my thing. I remember the images, but the names not as much. So I just knew those guys were the Kings owners, and I sat up with binoculars with my friends. It was a group of friends, and we were sitting up in the nosebleeds. And I was saying, the Kings owners are sitting courtside, the new Kings owners. And they're like, oh, how do you know that? Whatever, man. You're an encyclopedia for this stuff. How would you even know, And so I went down on the next dead ball. I said, does anyone want to come with me? I want to go meet him. Whatever. I don't want to, So I went on my own down there. And my thought was, I'm just going to go talk to him because I was so passionate that moment. I was like, I got to get him on my show. So I started to go down to the lower level at Arco Arena, and I was stopped by one of the ushers. And, he just instantly goes, where's your ticket? And, I used to joke. I used to have the nacho move back then where you fill your hands up with a nacho and a Coke. Then if someone asks you for tickets, that way you could sit in the lower seats. Like, dude, what do you really want me to get my ticket out here? Come on, man. My hands are full.
That's great.
I didn't have anything in my hands then. So the first thing came, I got to go see my uncles. Who's your uncle? I can't even remember their names. So I'm thinking, well, they're down there. It's my uncle. It's Joe and Gavin. I remembered. I think that part. I forgot they were the Maloofs, but Joe and Gavin. Well, which one? I don't care. Just any of my uncles. I just got to tell them something real quick. All right, next dead ball. I'll send them up. And I thought, okay. So I sat waiting for the next dead ball. It felt like it was an eternity, and it was Gavin who, if you know the brothers. Joe was more of the gregarious, fun-loving, Italian, hey, come on in type guy. He would have been the right one to get.
Yeah.
But no, it was probably told there's some freaking kid up here saying he's your nephew. And it was Gavin like, well, who the hell? And, he walks up, pissed off look on his face, slicked back hair and a suit. I just stuck my hand out and I said, hey Gavin, I didn't think I said Gavin. I don't even know if I said Mr. Maloof. said, hey,
Hey,
obviously, obviously we're not related. Let's, almost like, let's get that out of the way. But I have a sports television show, and none of, just always, for whatever reason, like the things come to me in the moment. It's like, it just boom, like it came to my brain and I just said it. I said, I have a sports television show in Sacramento, specifically in Placer County, which I'm sure you're aware of is where the majority of your season ticket holders live. Mm-hmm. And while many people are excited about new ownership and what it might mean, this is a place where we're very resistant to change. I think it would behoove you to get ahead of that and come on the show and set the record straight about why you purchased this team, the direction you have for it. And so,
how old are you at this time?
When
you roll that out?
I was a freshman in high school.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, freshman in high school. Yeah. So he just looked at me and said, so we got to come to you or you can come to us? And I said, well, honestly, it'd be better if you came to me. Mm-hmm. Nah, it's going to be tough, man. Tell you what, can you just do me a huge favor? Can you come for the San Antonio game we have coming up? Can you just, tell you what, come, we'll get the booth going. Just, you can sit in the booth, we'll talk, and then at halftime we can do your interview.
Yeah.
Will that work?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'll check my calendar. I think it should.
Check my calendar.
And that whole night became crazy. Had to get a cameraman last minute. It was all these things. And so fast forward back to me going down with the Maloofs after the interview, hitting it off with them. And from that point forward, them basically like, hey, kid, you're ours. Like, we're going to take you under our wing. Like another angel moment of like favor that just made no sense. Like, why would these two guys do that? But they literally were like, hey, you're the first interview we've done on television since coming to Sacramento. And so we're going to, you're with us. They took me to Utah for game 5, just all this stuff. But that night they brought me down. I interviewed a really tall, slender draft pick that was I think he was in his first or second year there, Peja Stojakovic, who almost needed a translator. And I just interviewed guys as they're coming out. Vernon Maxwell's got a beer in his hand doing an interview with me. Here I'm the kid. Everyone else is in the locker room. I'm on the outside catching them when they go out. And then I waited because there was one guy I wanted to talk to, and that was Chris Webber. And he was talking with Steve Fisher, his coach, former Michigan coach at the time, who was on the staff. And his agent was out there, and she was getting annoyed. She was just like, you guys, like, let him go. Like, he's tired. He just played a long game. And when Chris came out, it was just one of the, definitely coolest moments of my childhood. But he just looked at me and goes, like, were you really waiting for me this long? And I said, yeah. I got my little cheap dress shirt on and tie and, clip-on tie probably. And I go, yeah, I just, I really wanted to get a chance to connect with you and da-da-da-da. And he goes, he sets his bags down and he goes, I'll have as much time as you have. And we sat and we talked. And from that day forward, every time I was around the locker room, he would point me out, bring me over. Wasn't just for like a show thing. Like, he'd pull me aside. We had conversations about African art. I was studying a lot about Malcolm X and civil rights, and so I had questions for him about that. Yeah. And he was explaining things. And one day his parents were there and had me sit next to his parents at the game. Wow. And just, again, like loved on in a way that doesn't make sense. But it was through meeting Chris in that way. And I've never connected with him since then, like ever. It's super random. But it was through learning him in that way and all his layers that I look at what I'm doing now, and it's so similar to what it is then without the formalities of the interviews.
Crazy. That is a story. That is a story.
I mean, as I'm listening to this too, it's like you can't help but to reference your journey. We talked about this yesterday when we went on a walk yesterday, and we were talking about the Rick Rubin podcast that we just listened to with Jimmy Iovine, which we'll touch. But how many dreams people have that are unexecuted, right? Yeah. And you and I have, I feel like, a huge similarity in our activator.
Totally.
Right? It's kind of like if you think about it, you're taking these action steps and you're figuring it out as you go.
Yeah.
Right? It's what you've done with Cheatcode. If you were to, this came upon me, but if you were to cross paths with Chris Webber, what would you say to him?
Oh man, I probably would get a little emotional. I'd probably tear up. But I would ask him, hey man, I don't know if you remember me. I used to have hair and it was curly, and I was a big kid in the locker room. And I imagine he would, of course, remember me. I just tell him thank you. You know, I'm again, just that loyalty to people that have loved on me would shine through. And I just really want him to know, like, I just want you to know that you were one of the moments in my life that inspired me to keep going. And, you know, when you do, I think that's the thing too, is that a lot of people don't try, like we were talking about yesterday, because they feel like they have to have it all figured out. I think a lot of kids now especially feel like they have to, you know, put on almost a front in many ways, and they're terrified of failing or terrified of looking stupid. I just never had that fear. Probably would have done me some good in other areas of my life, but I've just kind of been like, you know what, if I want it, I'll go after it. But when you have success, you know, when you get to do some things that everyone says no one can do, you start to believe not even so much in yourself as much as it is like, you all have it wrong. Like, it ain't so much about me. It's that the only limits that you'll encounter are those which are self-imposed.
That's right.
I said that as a kid, and I just remember as a kid that making sense to me. I probably heard it somewhere, put it in my own words, and I just retold it my whole life. The only limits I have, I am putting on myself. So there's only one person that can control where I head, and that's me, and what I determine to believe into and feed into or not. And so I think, yeah, from a young age, it was moments like that, though, that give you the reinforcement. And so I'd say to him, you know, I just tell him how much I love him and how much I appreciate him doing that, because it's been so life-giving to me, but then in turn, life-giving to others.
That's awesome. Talk about real quick, I know we don't have a lot of time, but so your role and involvement with the Tennessee Titans, one of the things that I'm curious to know about is, you know, being friends with you for the amount of years I've been friends with you, vulnerability is something that just comes easy for us.
Yeah.
You know, we can geek out on Brene Brown books, and I feel like we've talked about we're the new generation of men where we're not scared to talk about our feelings. But I'm envisioning like big 300-pound football players. You know what I mean? I'm envisioning just athletes that maybe haven't been brought to that area to sit down and talk about feelings and cry in front of other men. So talk through what that looks like, and maybe what it looked like in the beginning to where you're at now with these athletes.
Yeah, it started really with, and I always give Mike credit for this, that it started with him truly knowing. I think great leaders know what they know and they know what they don't know. And I think a lot of mediocre leaders tend to surround themselves with others that just think like them. And what I loved about Mike Vrabel is that when he brought me in, he's like, I don't know anything about this, but I've done my homework enough to figure that I believe you do. And I'm not very good at this. So can you come in here? And the goal simply was, where it started was, just help these guys have an outlet. That's all, because they're dealing with so much. And then what started is basically us, you know, me giving, I've probably now maybe 7 or 8 times had to stand up in front of the team and do teachings and, you know, things like that, and different stuff we're working on. Through time, guys would just kind of start gravitating to, hey, like, I could use a little more support. And initially it was a lot of the leaders on the team that started doing it, and that gave us some ability to have others do it. It was very behind the scenes. It was kind of like we had this relationship. They'd see us, people would see us in the building, still not be sure of who we were. And then over time, because we were in so many big moments with them, and then last year we were in the locker room, it evolved into something much different. And even something that now the goal that they have in Tennessee is to make this just part of what everyone does. It's part of the program. And so we do draft, you know, when Will Levis and those guys are coming in to the rookie class, I had already met them during the scouting process, because I interviewed all the quarterbacks as part of our assessments that we did to figure out who a good fit would be. And so when they come in, it's kind of like, all right, well, here's Mondo or Manu, who's my right-hand man there, and you're working with either one of them. It's just kind of the way it is. But yeah, it's never lost on me how big it is for men, especially in NFL culture, but also too, let's be honest, you know, Coach Vrabel is a throwback. You know, he's I can't remember, I was talking to someone when I was out in Tennessee a longtime coach. He coached for the Titans for a while. Said he's the closest thing to Mike Ditka that I've seen in terms of players love him, but also too he's hard nosed. He's tough. He's tough on everyone. He holds everyone to a high standard. So it's not lost on me when I'll have, as you said, you know, a lot of the guys on that team just geographically come from the Deep South. So a lot of them, you know, there's a lot of black men from the Deep South that have every reason in the world to never open up to anyone. You know, I think they have good reason. I always start by validating that.
Yeah.
And they never were taught. They didn't have outlets for it. It was seen as weak. And then now I'm a guy that they see, that they know the team brought me. And they got so many reasons not to open up to me. So when those guys that you just, you know, I remember there was a guy last year that I briefly worked with on the team that had kind of, you know, there's a lot of, at times you feel like in that particular environment, it's so different than my other environment where the athletes are seeking me out. I'm almost, it's like ministry. It's like you're just trying to hang out and eat lunch with them. You're trying to just talk with them, gain little entry points. Some of them are so closed off. This one particular guy really closed off, just to everyone in general, but especially us. And I remember just going by him after practice and just smacking him on the pads and saying, "What's up?" to him. And he looked up at me with kind of an intense look in his eye, and he goes, "I need to tap in." And that's what I've taught them to say that when it's time to meet. He goes, "Yeah, I'm trying to tap in with you." And I said, "Let's go right now." And he goes, "Okay, where are you going to be?" And so I was in a room, and he walks in, and probably within 30 seconds, probably 2 words were said, and just waterworks.
Dang.
Wow.
And, you know, it's like moments like that where you're just like, wow, these guys are holding so much in. They don't know how to manage it. By the time he talked through what was in his head, he felt so good and so focused. And so you have moments where we call those drive-bys, right? Like you just might get one of those, then you might, you know, now have a better relationship. Then you have your guys you're meeting with consistently every single week that are constantly doing this work. And then it turned in towards the end of the year. We're flying on team planes, and we had one guy next to me that never said a word to me. And he's over trying to hold my hand because he's having a panic attack as we're leaving Green Bay.
Wow.
And then I really need to tap in with you, you know, and the relationships unfold. And that particular guy in week 8, I think it was, that reached out becomes a guy I start meeting with regularly. And then, you know, before week 18's final game that ended up determining the division, we're in the locker room, and it's, you know, Vrabel's screaming 10 minutes till we got to be out there. And he and I are in the broom closet, and we're doing our level up sessions where he's got headphones on, we're doing brain spotting, and I'm taking him to a level of intensity that he rarely feels. And he's ready to, he looks like he could kill me, right? He's so just jacked beyond and so locked in. And so we, you know, the same guy that spends time with me crying and releasing pain, I'm also helping them get into this performance place in their mind using a lot more of these neurophysiological interventions that we have in our field now to get them to a point of feeling something that they want to feel, and then making it repeatable to where they can feel it over and over and over again. And that then becomes similar to where my work with Dansby progressed to. Almost, we call it, like, I call him like, I'm about to Frankenstein you, man. Like, let's figure out the 4 things that make you tick when you're in that place. Let's figure out the 2 that have been elusive, and let's make it to where you only feel that when you go out there and you compete. And once we get you there, it's not fair. You have a cheat code. You have a competitive advantage over everyone else. Everyone else trying to find a way to get there, they got to eat the right thing before. It's all superstition based. Nah, for us, we're going to create a concrete plan methodically and just hit it over and over until it's just the way of being.
So you fully believe then that the work that you're doing with these athletes through therapy, through brain spotting, that there's measurable results that lead to better performance?
Yes, I have to be careful with that because I've learned that too. Because the passionate me would say at the beginning, without a doubt, because I got fortunate that early in my career. I think part of what, and really this career, again, all of this started in 2019 is when I met Dansby. And so it's still brand new, but again, God thing. But a lot of the people that I worked with, I was fortunate that they had this immediate increase, whether I was a key part, a small part, or a confounding variable, right? For whatever reason, they went out and they made all-star teams or Chris Godwin won a Super Bowl. And, it was like, it was all happening. Dansby won the World Series. Dansby makes his first all-star team. Dansby goes from, being projected to make, $80 million on a 7-year deal to making $180 million on a 7-year deal. And just like all these things. And then you have them and their agents and the people in the front office in organizations going, this is a cheat code.
Yeah.
But even then, there's still so many behind the scenes balls that I'm, bouncing of trying to keep pushing it along because people know it's making an impact. They're, in some cases, it's just so outside the box that they're trying to wrap their heads around how much to invest in it and how important it really is and how many results it really makes. And, I've had some interesting debates. There's a major league manager that I got to be pretty close with, who he and I kind of got almost in a friendly shouting match about whether or not this stuff really impacted wins and losses. And I'm happy to say that today I think he believes more in it than he did at that time. So,
Same.
So yeah, it's you want to always. I try to always remind myself I'm doing it for eternal impact, which is that's the God stuff, right? It's like I'm doing it to make better human beings and to empower people to live into their callings. But I also do believe that when we live in our calling and our purpose, we tend to do better, right? Like we produce better results. So I'm also not afraid to say that I think this element is crucial to their success.
See, Chris, this is what I was worried about, man. I'm so fascinated by that stuff. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. We could do a whole show on that performance stuff. I'm fascinated by it.
I'm here for it, man.
I know you are, but let's. I know a lot of your stories has gone about life kind of takes you where it is, and you're so good in the moment. But I'm interested to see what the plan is. What does 5 years from now look like with you and Cheat Code? What's the next steps for you, man?
Yeah, I feel like right now I can only speak to this specific moment and what I feel like God's revealed to me. But I feel like the things I know to be true in this season of my life, in this very moment, today, as we're having this conversation, that my main focus needs to be taking care of the flock that he's put in front of me right now.
Love it. So
my natural tendency is towards, as Chris knows extremely well, is towards expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And being in this world too, working with athletes, I've always had the dog in me, the competitor in me.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily competitive with others, but competitive with myself. Like I know there's more in there.
Yep.
And I have to be careful because at times I want to go and just build. And there's so many opportunities, podcast,
mm-hmm.
television show. It's
mm-hmm.
like what to say yes to. And so for me, I think the thing what I'm trying to really focus on is I need to just take care of what God's trusted me with now.
Yep.
And that starts with my wife, Katie. It starts with my 2 children, Antonio and Isabella. Then there's a friend circle, La Familia. Shout out to La Familia. You know who you are. And just the inner circle of people that are there that I do my walk with. I want to make sure that I'm being excellent in those areas right now. And then also take care of the flock that he put in front of me in terms of my clients that I have. Like in some cases with Dansby, we've talked about, who knows? But I think we'll end up working together for a long time. And, so I want to take care of, be a good steward of what I have right now. But I also know that as time goes on, that there's definitely been openings that he's put on my heart for teaching, speaking, pastoring. And so I know it's headed more in that way. And I know that a lot of my long-term focus has always been when we built the businesses, and I call the foundation a business as well because you have to run it
mm-hmm.
with some sort of business, mindset. Otherwise it won't last and you won't have the impact you want. I said, when I built the foundation, I'm building it brick by brick because I want to serve there with my family and my friends.
Yeah.
So I know that progressively I will be moving more towards finding a way to take access. That's the issue I'm passionate about. Not so much stigma, because like Chris said, stigma is not a big thing I can even relate to. It's more, I've been saying now for a few years that the bigger issue is access. So many people now are in wanting to get this experience of going to therapy, counseling, whatever it may be. They don't have access. And so the foundation's goal is going to be to get access to people that need it the most. So people that are really hurting and in bad spots, can't afford therapy, finding ways to address the workforce shortage. So, that for me, Renee, is like what I want more than anything, is to use the platform. I've had people ask me a lot over this last 3 years, okay, so, do you want to take this opportunity to work with me? I'll make you the next Dr. Phil, the next Tony Robbins. I go, I don't want to be either of them. I just don't. I have no desire whatsoever. But what I do want, and what I've been strategic about, is I want to build enough of a name that allows me to get access to those rooms to advocate for others. Incredible. And whether it's social policies around mental health and mental health access. So I hope in 5 years that a lot of what I'm doing has shifted more to scaling a bigger impact, being, as Pastor Cesek said, an exponential change component. How can I take what I have and what I've learned, but find a way to create exponential change? To me, that's the Rubik's Cube that I'll spin my whole life. And I hope as I get further in my journey that'll be really where my focus is at. And also too, like, that's also why I have brothers like Chris and Theo and Aaron and, the guys that and Kyle, the guys that I hold close, because it is so easy to have that intention and have life have the demands of life or just the distractions of life and get slowly tethered from that.
Yep.
So that's what I hope for.
And that, Chris, is the definition of leaving a legacy.
I mean, you can relate to that,
Come
Renee,
on,
because
man.
we're literally.
Come on, man.
He's when he talks about being the family man, and I see it. Coincidentally, yesterday Armando had his kids over to my house for swimming in 4th of July, and just being around his kids. But you're in the thick of it right now yourself. I mean, I can tell you right now with Renee, this dude owns multiple businesses. I joke because I'm like, man, I used to spend a lot more time with Renee. So now the time is limited due to his kid schedule. But he's got 3 kids. All of them are in sports. And this guy is literally father of the year. I mean, it is family first.
It's inspiring, man.
It's family first. So I know when he says that, it's very relatable to you.
For sure, man. I'm hanging on for dear life right now. So, I mean, but we're enjoying every minute of it. And, we work hard to try to get it right. And that's why the stuff that you're saying is so fascinating, because you have to deep think to really execute what you're trying to execute, not just trying hard, not just giving your all, but giving your all in a pointed way is what the next step needs to be for me personally. And so I know you're going through a lot of that stuff and helping people through a lot of that stuff. So I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah,
man. I mean, we will.
We can't leave this podcast without talking about some inspiration. You mentioned his name, but I'm going to say rest in peace, Papa Court. But
yeah,
give us just a little brief snapshot of the role that man played in your life.
Man. Yeah, so Papa Court, my grandfather, he passed away right at the beginning of COVID. There's guys in this room that had a chance to spend time with him. They knew how important he was in my life. We got in this rhythm that was really special of doing lunch every Wednesday for over 10 years.
Wow.
And believe me, we missed some, but it was usually me missing it. And boy, did he give me hell every time I missed it. I mean, he laid the guilt trip on. I'm like, I got to work. You told me work's important, and I got to provide it for my family. Well, if you can't make time for family, my grandfather, I found out from people, he was a civil engineer. He helped build highways, around here and did just all sorts of different civil projects. And I found out that, his name was, synonymous with curse words. To say his name was like, I don't want to be near that guy. He is he is so intense, so demanding. And, the role he had in my life as a kid was like the guy that taught me these standards that were just, you know, to this day are helpful in so many ways. And they're the reason that I will never do anything halfway. It has to be done with excellence, because that was him. Because as an engineer, he said there's two ways to design something, the right way or the wrong way. And while that black and white thinking has got me in trouble in a lot of ways, it's also been part of what got me here today. And towards the end of his life, he softened so much. And I felt like really, that was a personal challenge of mine. You know, he never said I love you to his kids, just didn't. So of course, me being the kind of kid I am, that's a challenge to me, right? As a kid, every time I hung up the phone with him, all right, Grandpa, one more thing. What? I love you. And he just, I love you too, you know? And by the end of his life, the last 10, 12 years, and he spent time with my kids, he couldn't stop saying that word.
Man.
And, you know, so he poured into me, I poured into him. We really did a lot for one another. It was really important for me to lead him to God too, because towards the end, he was, I know, very much unsure and so logical. And we had so many conversations. And I know that the day that he went to the hospital, which was the last day that I saw him and I drove him there, he had sepsis. And he was recounting the Lord's Prayer. And he never, as far as I knew, ever was taught it. It was, you know, so I said to him, last thing that I said to him coherently was, you know, Grandpa, as I'm driving him to the hospital, I said, you know, I've worried a lot about you and where you stand with God. And I've been too afraid to ever ask you. But I feel like when I was on my way up here today, God told me that you guys are in a really good place. And he was not coherent. He was in a different state of mind with his sepsis. And he looked over at me in his smart-ass sort of way and said, oh, so you think you can talk to God now, do you? Last coherent moment I had with him. Wow. But Grandpa Court taught all of us in our family that you do things the right way. You do it with excellence. Family's number one. You put family over everything. Nothing else matters but family and hard work. And service too. You know, my grandfather never made it about, you know, going around telling people how much he served. But if I observed his life, he was retired from the moment I knew him, but he was never not working 6 days a week. And it was always in service to others. Someone had a fence to build. Someone had something they needed help with. It was just, he couldn't stand to not be doing or impacting. And for me, I look at so many of the ways that I view things, and it's so often that I come back more than anyone to him and what he was all about. So yeah, he's the moment in my mind, the internalized, you know, Papa Court, Grandpa Court voice. He's the voice that can get me kind of to hear the hard truth and to own up to things. But he's also the voice that says, are you really going to leave the job 92% done?
I love that.
Like, what is wrong with you, right? He's the guy that got me to run a marathon with Chris when I had some sort of stomach condition that I probably should have been in the hospital. But the whole time I'm thinking, boy, he'd give me a lot of shit if I ended up not running this thing, you know? And so, yeah, I'm just, my kids know that what it means to be a Gonzalez is never give up. They say that over and over. And that came from him.
Incredible. Well, hey, we're going to wrap up with some fun on the way out. We got a few questions that we're just going to run into.
I love it. Let's go.
I'll start off. Top 5 musical artists of all time for you.
No specific order.
Yeah. Okay. So I can let's name 5. Top 5. I'm going to just put Michael Jackson in there because of the fact that in my mind he's the greatest of all time. Jay-Z is my favorite artist of all time. He's my number 1. Let's see. Whitney Houston, growing up as a kid, still just infatuated with her.
Who's the lead singer of Matchbox 20?
That's Rob Thomas. I don't
know
if they're top 5? No, they're not a top 5. I took Chris to a Matchbox 20 concert, and he'll never let me live it down. But I'll tell you, I'm a vulnerable guy. I like some Matchbox 20. You know what? But he opened up my mind there. Coldplay.
Okay.
I'm a
like
huge, Huge
go.
Renee's a
Coldplay fan.
huge Coldplay guy.
Well, after today is going to be.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one, I'll say, Al Green. Al Green.
Man.
I love that era so much. But for me, like, I always felt like Al was my guy.
That is a 5.
I like it, man.
That is a 5. I
That was
love
my
it.
guy.
Man, all right. So the next question. This is a fun one for me. Now, in being your friend for as long as I have, we've gone off and on with this topic. All right.
Yeah.
But it's a topic that is very close to my heart. Okay. That's food. That's restaurants. Right. So obviously you went vegan, and when you went vegan, you were in the paint.
My grandfather told me if I was going to do it, I got to go all the way, right?
It is.
Now you've been doing a lot of traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're in Chicago, Tennessee. I mean, you're all over the place. I've gone on tours with you. So give us your top 5 restaurants in no order, and it could be Sacramento. I want to hear at least a couple in Sacramento.
Yeah. I got to get Sac love.
But if there's any restaurants that come to mind from other cities that you have visited, right? We'd like to hear about them.
There's a ritual that I have in Nashville with my brother Manu Muasau, who's the other coach that I brought in. He's finishing his doctorate of psychology. He played for the New York Giants briefly as well. And we have this thing where we always land at the same time. He flies in from Atlanta, I fly in from Sac. And there's no words spoken. Did you get it? Did you get the order in or what? And it's for Emmy Squared. Shout out to Emmy Squared. Emmy Squared is Detroit style pizza, and they have spots. I don't even think it started in Nashville, but they have a few of them in Nashville, and it's the best pizza for me personally. It's that I'll give another shout out here to a local restaurant, but that Emmy Squared has to be in the conversation. It's a place that every time I'm there, you got to go. In Atlanta,
There's a vegan spot in Atlanta, right?
yeah, to Sealy's Raw Reality, which sounds like it could mean a lot of things, but it's a vegan restaurant, and they have incredible wraps there. And I know it's like wraps. Oh yeah, wraps sound exciting. I'm telling you, this it's just so flavorful. You feel good afterwards. Anyway, that place is definitely on the radar. And then I'll take it here local to kind of round it out, but I think nostalgia is big for me too. My wife and I went for probably, years. On every Friday night we went to One Speed in Sacramento. And, again, as food critics, Chris, we know they changed a little bit of the design on the pepperoni pizza, went away from the smaller look, it's still One Speed. It's still great.
Yep.
Love what Rick and those guys have done.
It's the nostalgia for you.
Nostalgia for sure. There's also a lot of nostalgia. Mexican food is one of my favorites. There's a lot of places I love in Sacramento, but my mom she makes incredible carnitas, and the only carnitas that I feel like come close is at Tres Hermanas.
Okay.
So I got to throw that in there, and then on the 5th, a place that I always feel like is one of the best kept secrets in Sacramento, in part because they're hardly ever open, but Juno's Kitchen. And
They make a darn good sandwich.
oh my gosh, man. If you could ever catch them on a day they're open, they are unbelievable.
Hey, and shout out real quick, because Renee turned me on to a new spot, and I rarely go to Roseville. You know that. I mean, you and I are very similar. We're grid people, right? We
Yeah,
like to stay close to Midtown, downtown. But man, La Popular
You told me
in
about that.
Roseville
I told you.
is the most
I knew
fire
you'd like
Mexican spot in this entire Tri-County area.
Hey, I told you.
Man, it's crazy.
What is it about that? What kind of is it taqueria style? Is it more fine dining experience?
Both.
Yeah, the tacos are outside of the norm, and they get after it. It's high end, great atmosphere. It's just I just knew Chris would like it.
They killed it. You gotta go. You gotta check it out next time you're
I'm
in
going.
Roseville. You got another question for
All
me?
right, I'll make this one easy because I just want one. To the sportscaster, the one that loves sports, what's your number one athlete of all time?
Muhammad Ali.
Ooh,
Wow.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali. Because
I thought Michael Jordan was going to come out of your mouth. You go Muhammad.
well, yeah, and that's again because of the fact that to me he's also the answer to my favorite humanitarian of all
yeah.
time. And
Let's go.
as a kid, again, strange, different curiosities and obsessions, but was obsessed with Malcolm X, which led me to his friendship with Ali. Started reading all about Ali, started understanding Ali's story. You know, I had a dog I named Cassius. Like, I was just so into Ali and the story of him, you know, his professional sports story, of course, and him being the greatest there, but then also too, just what he did with his platform. When I was working with Ryan Garcia, that was the guy that I used to always tell him, I said, if you want one North Star to look to, look no further than Ali. Man. And we used to always talk about that. And I just love Ali so much.
Incredible.
Man.
Who are cuter people, the Mexicans or the Filipinos, in your humble opinion?
Oh, boy.
Because I know that you're Mexican, but we also, behind the camera right now, we have two of our favorite Filipinos. So
you say cuter people, more attractive looking?
Just cuter.
Cuter.
Yeah.
I would say that on the whole, Mexicans are more attractive.
Okay.
However, I would say there's nothing more cute and cuddly than Filipinos, right? I mean, and that's just because we got some friends in here right now that are Filipino. If the last thing I say gets me canceled, I went down swinging, I guess, right?
So the last question that we have, and man, this has been awesome having you in here, man. I'll never just, not say this enough how proud I am of you, man.
I love you, man. Thank you.
Love being your friend. It's kind of just like surreal, just telling other people, like I said last night, I love showing you off to my new friends, but like, just listen to this guy's story. But we'll end on this. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Man. Oh, man.
That's a good one, huh? It gets you thinking.
My dad.
Your dad? There you go.
Yep.
There it is.
Yep. He was, I think in my lifetime, I probably saw him 12 times or less.
Wow.
And that I remember, because he was there 0 to 3. But, and again, it's a great question to end on, because the power of quality over quantity of love. And my dad spent 12 times with me in my life. He wrote infrequently. He called infrequently. He didn't necessarily always follow through on his promises. But the one thing is, I always knew how he felt about me. And I'll go to my grave knowing how much he loved me. And whatever shred of, charisma and passion I have, he had it a millionfold. So to spend time with him, because he's my dad, but also too, he was just such a dynamic human. And literally, part of the reason their marriage ended is because he would make his money and give it to homeless people on the way home while I was at home with my family. And that was just what he did. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that, historically could fit that, but when you're a kid that didn't get a lot of time with your dad, I think that's always one that you'd be like, I'd do that over anything.
What was his full name? Armando Gonzalez Fernandez.
You're Armando Gonzalez II.
Yeah, my son is Antonio Armando Gonzalez III.
So for a lot of the people that are close to you, they know that you crush a John Gruden accent, or an impression, I should say. You don't have to do this. I don't want to get you canceled. I know that you have certain agreements and bylaws, but we're looking for the same thing that Chris Webber did for you.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we're looking for is, you're now tuned into the Legacy Lounge with Chris and Renee.
Okay.
Just a little but in John Gruden voice.
I don't even get to warm up or anything.
You could actually add something to it.
Sure. Well, let me, if I'm going to do the Gruden, it's been a while because Gruden got canceled, so I haven't been able to do the Gruden. I felt comfortable doing the Gruden out loud. Lord forgive me. But, Gruden would start not by going straight into endorsement. He'd start just by kind of talking about the passion. So let's look at it. I'll tell you what, man, this Legacy Lounge, man, you got two guys in here, man. You got Renee and Chris, man. These two guys are Gruden grinders, man. Look at Renee's background, man. Everything this guy's ever done, man. All world class, man. You put Renee in any situation, man. I tell you what, I put him in nickel front, man. I put him in a DB back there, man. I make him my Brian Dawkins, maybe even at times, man. I'm flying up the middle, be that kind of guy, stopping the run. So he's also in back there. Reminds me a lot of John Lynch. And then you got your other guy, man, Chris. Chris is more of a Mike Allstock kind of guy. You knew I was going there, man. Had the big neck roll. That's the kind of guy, man. You're gonna put. I remember when they took Mike, man. They hooked over the back of an F-150, man. Took it up the entire hill, man. Incredible. This Legacy Lounge, man. This is where legacy's coming to be made. So this is John Gruden, your former head football coach of the Oakland Raiders, Tampa Bay Bucks, ESPN, all those other things. You're listening to Legacy Lounge. That is great. That is great. About like it. Oh yeah.
Hey, real quick before we end, I just want to say this real quick. We're on a road trip, Mondo, me, Mango, and we're driving. Oh man, I don't know where we were at. I want to say we were like in. I don't know. We were in Kansas City.
Yeah. Missouri. But I just not to
This guy randomly calls a barbecue restaurant, and for 15 minutes, just trolled this guy.
I love doing voices. You know, I just thought I love having fun. I tell myself that was fun for the person on the other end because it was confusing. I said this to Aaron, but I've learned that's my genre of comedy is confusion. I love confusing people. So yeah, I called and I was asking her what she recommended on the menu. I've even done that to people at Trader Joe's where I'll ask them if they have different things in stock in the Gruden voice.
It's fun.
If it keeps giving.
It's fun. Well, anyway, we appreciate episode 1. This is special. I cannot wait to see where we take this, but it means a lot to me as your friend. Somebody looks up to you that you were able to be our very first guest on the show. We love you, man.
Okay, thank you guys. This is going to do really well. I'm very excited for it, and I think that one thing I'll say too is that we, here in Sacramento, we have so many great things happening, and we need people to take the initiative to do stuff like this to really truly showcase what's happening here. But then also two guys that are willing to kind of really peel back the layers to what makes them tick and what makes others tick. So I'm proud of you guys for doing this, man. Keep going.
Appreciate it.